Before time existed, before light pierced the darkness, before even the concept of beginning made sense, there was something, or someone. Every religion, every ancient culture, and every curious mind has asked the same haunting question. Who was God before creation? Not just where he came from, but what was there when there was nothing? How does something conscious, powerful, and eternal exist without space, without time, without form? This story begins long before Genesis, before the Big Bang, before any stars dared to shine. Imagine the silence, not the kind we experience here on Earth, but an infinite stillness where nothing breathes, nothing moves, and nothing is. In that void, something stirred. Was it thought, will, love, or something beyond what the human mind can grasp? What kind of existence was that? And what kind of being chooses to break that silence and create a world? In this journey, we're not just asking theological questions. We're exploring the deepest layers of mystery, belief, and imagination. This isn't about any one religion. It's about the idea behind all of them. Who or what is God when there's no one to call him that? What does it mean to be eternal, self-aware, and unchanging before even change existed? As we follow ancient texts, philosophical theories, and spiritual visions passed down through centuries, one truth emerges. No matter how far back we go, the origin of God remains the greatest mystery of all. And just when you think you're close to the answer, something else appears, something hidden, something that could change the way we see everything that followed. But before we reveal what that is, you need to hear what came next. In the earliest whispers of human history, people stared up at the stars and felt something looking back. Across deserts, jungles, and frozen lands, different civilizations gave that presence a name, sometimes many names. But they all pointed to the same unknown. They didn't just ask who God was, they asked why. Why would an all-powerful being choose to create? Was it loneliness? Was it purpose? Or was it something we've never even considered? From the ancient Sumerians to the early Hebrew texts, from Egyptian scrolls to Hindu scriptures, we see the same pattern. Creation rising out of a formless void, spoken or shaped by a single will. But what was that will before it ever created? Was there thought without a brain? Emotion without a heart? Could something be alive in a place where nothing existed to define life? Some texts hint at a deeper truth, one they rarely say out loud. That before creation, God may have wrestled with something. Not an enemy, not a rival, but perhaps himself, or perhaps something even more ancient, more buried, hiding behind the illusion of beginning. And as we peel back these ancient layers, we find not answers, but more questions. Questions that some believe we were never meant to ask. As centuries passed and civilizations rose and fell, humanity kept digging deeper, not just into the earth, but into their own souls, searching for the origin of God. Philosophers argued in stone halls, prophets wept in deserts, and mystics disappeared into mountains, all chasing the same invisible presence. Some believed God was always alone. Others believed something else was there too, something hidden, something ancient enough to challenge even the idea of one creator. Was God the first, or was he the last in a line of forgotten forces? The deeper people searched, the stranger the stories became. In old clay tablets buried under sand, there were whispers of time before time, a realm where even God had to make a choice, to remain forever in silence, or to open the door to existence and risk everything. Some scrolls tell of a voice behind a voice, a power that spoke once and never again, yet left an echo so strong it shaped the divine itself. What if creation wasn't a beginning, but a break from something even more eternal? And then there were the visions. From monks in candlelit caves to children who spoke of dreams they couldn't understand, one image kept returning, a darkness before light, and a presence within that darkness. Not evil, not good, just watching. Always watching. Was it God's shadow, or was something else entirely? While faith offered comfort, these fragments left behind a strange discomfort. If God came from beyond all that we know, what came with him? Or worse, What did he leave behind when he crossed into creation? As these questions spread through temples, churches, and secret gatherings, one thing became clear. We might not be alone in our search, and someone or something might not want us to find the truth. In the quiet corners of ancient monasteries and sealed libraries, there were documents never meant to see the light. Writings that described not just God, but what God remembered. These weren't stories of creation, but of before. Symbols scratched into stone, older than language itself, seemed to describe a fracture, a moment where something split. Not a battle, not a fall, just a decision, so ancient and so silent that it echoed across eternity. Scholars went missing after chasing these clues. One in Cairo vanished the night before he was supposed to reveal a translation. A historian in Istanbul mailed a single page of notes, then disappeared without a trace. Each clue led closer to something hidden, something most people didn't want to believe. That maybe God had not been alone in that first moment. That maybe something had watched him create the world and did nothing to stop it. A strange pattern began to emerge. The same symbols kept appearing, etched in a stone in Peru, carved into cave walls in India, even hidden in medieval cathedrals. Always in the shadows, always speaking of an origin before the origin. Whispers of a being not of light, not of darkness, but of stillness. An entity that never moved, never spoke, yet was always there. And then came the dreams. People across different continents, people who had never met, never even heard of each other, described the same thing. A place outside time where a voice said nothing, but everyone felt it. A presence that felt older than belief itself. Not threatening, not kind, just watching, waiting. The closer the truth came, the more the world around it resisted. Doors that once opened now stayed locked. Lights flickered in rooms where secrets were spoken. And for those who continued the search, one question grew louder in their minds. Asterisk, what if God didn't create everything? What if something else led him? Asterisk. The question haunted them. What if something else led him? That thought alone was enough to unnerve even the most faithful. But then came the twist no one expected. Hidden in a 13th century manuscript buried beneath a collapsed chapel in southern France, researchers uncovered a symbol unlike any they'd seen before, a perfect circle with a broken line through its center, surrounded by writing in a language that matched no known script. When deciphered using pattern recognition tied to ancient root tongues, one phrase emerged, the permission. It shook the team. The idea that God, eternal, omnipotent, may have asked, or worse, needed permission to create. The implications were terrifying. Who or what could grant such a thing? Was this entity still watching or waiting? Some argued it was metaphor, a poetic myth lost to time. But those who kept digging found more. In ancient Babylonian star maps, one constellation was carefully removed from later charts. In remote Himalayan temples, monks spoke of a silent sibling, a force that predates even the divine, one that does not act but observes the actors. Then came the shock. A linguist from Prague cross-referenced multiple sources and stumbled on a disturbing match. The same phrase, the permission, was found in a remote Polynesian chant that spoke of the world being a second thought, not a first. That chant ended with a warning. When the silence breaks, the truth awakens. Suddenly, it wasn't just old scrolls and forgotten symbols. People began reporting strange experiences, clocks stopping at the same moment, voices whispering in empty rooms, visions during meditation or prayer that didn't match their beliefs, but felt more real than anything they'd known. Not divine, not demonic, just watching, as if something remembered being here long before we did. And it might not be finished waiting. The signs became impossible to ignore. Across continents, researchers, spiritual leaders, and even skeptics were all drawn toward the same truth. Not by force, but by something gentler, like gravity pulling their thoughts inward. The broken circle symbol appeared again, this time in satellite images from a remote desert. Carved into the earth, too precise to be natural, too ancient to be man-made. And at its center, a stone that hummed with a vibration that couldn't be explained. Not sound, not energy, Something else. A group of linguists, archaeologists, and theologians gathered at the site. Many didn't believe in God the same way, but they all felt the same thing when they touched the stone: memory. Not their own, but a presence that carried remembrance. Not of people or stars or time, but of before. And in that moment, everything changed. The visions came stronger now, clearer. Each person saw the same image: God, standing not in light, not in darkness, but in a place of stillness. And before him, a doorway. But he didn't walk through it. He asked. There was no voice, no answer, just a pause. Then the door opened, and creation began. It wasn't forced. It wasn't commanded. It was permitted. That was the truth. God was not alone, but not bound either. The origin was not a single act of power, but a choice, a risk. And whoever or whatever gave that permission, it never left. It simply watched. As the team returned to share what they found, one member, a quiet young linguist named Layla, vanished from her hotel room in the middle of the night. No sign of struggle, only a note left on the mirror, written in that ancient script. Asterisk, it has seen you too. Asterisk, the world would never be the same again. For days, the team was silent. Layla's disappearance cast a shadow over everything. Security footage showed nothing, just her entering the room and never coming out. No sounds, no forced entry, no trace. Her belongings were untouched, except for a torn page from one of her notebooks, left half-hidden beneath the bed. It was a translation she had been working on, an old chant from an ancient, unclassified tongue. The final line read, "When the origin remembers, it calls back what was borrowed." They didn't understand it at first, but the more they studied, the more it made sense. All their lives, they had thought of God as the beginning. But what if he was a response? Not a cause, but a reaction. Something greater than nothing, yes, but still something that emerged after something else had made room. Like a spark in the darkness that was never empty to begin with. The group eventually disbanded. Some returned home, too shaken to continue. Others kept working quietly under the radar. The knowledge they held now wasn't something they could publish. It wasn't scientific. It wasn't religious dogma. It was something in between, too vast to be owned by any one belief system, too personal to be explained without sounding mad. One of them, a retired theologian named Marcus, chose to speak publicly, not about Layla or the stone or the symbol, but about the idea itself. He gave a lecture in a small university auditorium where only a few students gathered. He didn't quote scripture or scientific studies. He just told a story about a God who didn't roar into existence, but paused, considered, asked. A God who chose to begin when he could have stayed still forever. And in that choice, there was something beautiful, vulnerable, even, because it meant creation wasn't born from dominance. It was born from humility, from permission. As Marcus finished, he looked out over the quiet room and said, if God asked to create, then maybe the sacred isn't just in power. Maybe it's in the courage to ask. That night, the video of his talk went viral. People from all over the world responded, some with anger, some with curiosity, but most with a strange, quiet comfort. Not because they had answers, but because someone had finally voiced the question they've felt their whole lives. And still, in the background, the broken circle kept appearing. On walls, in dreams, on ancient artifacts discovered in places they shouldn't be. But nothing strange happened again. No more disappearances. No more whispers. Just that lingering feeling that the story wasn't over, but that for now, the page had been turned. Years passed. Many of the team members faded into quiet lives. Some became teachers, others spiritual guides, and a few, like Marcus, kept telling the story in ways that let people reflect on what creation really means. That maybe before anything existed, there wasn't chaos or even a God with a booming voice, but a stillness, a presence so full it didn't need to speak to be heard. And from that stillness came a God who wondered, who waited, who asked. Layla was never found, but on the anniversary of her disappearance, a package arrived at Marcus's door. No return address. Inside was a single sheet of handmade paper with a familiar symbol drawn in soft ink, the broken circle. Below it, one line written in her handwriting, "It never needed to be known." Just remembered. Marcus held that note for hours. He didn't try to trace it or contact authorities. He just stared at it, understanding something he hadn't before. That maybe this mystery wasn't meant to be solved, but carried. Not to explain the divine, but to remind us how fragile creation really is. That every choice we make, every moment we choose to love, to create, to forgive, echoes that very first choice, to begin when we could have remained still. The idea of who was God before creation didn't have a final answer, but maybe it never needed one. Maybe the real truth was in the question itself, because to wonder is to be human. And perhaps that's where we come closest to the divine, not in certainty, but in the courage to ask what cannot be fully known. And so the story ends not with a revelation, but with a reflection. That before the world began, something waited, watched, allowed. And from that silence, God stepped forward, not to dominate, but to participate. And we, in turn, were born from that same choice. If we carry anything forward from this story, let it be this. The most powerful beginning isn't the one that demands, but the one that dares to ask. And maybe, just maybe, that's what we were always meant to remember.